We live and work in interesting times, and the changing ways we communicate are at the heart of it. From our world
Yes, we can.
to our work,
We assume that about 1/3 of companies are not going to survive the next decade.
Most people will talk about Uber, you talk about Google, you talk about Facebook. There's probably about 15. There's 15 of these companies, and they've sprung up in a 15 to 20 year period.
digital disruption is here, and it's only just getting started.
At the height of the Industrial Revolution, there was 150 companies in a 15 to 20 year period that sprung from nowhere and went on to be huge organizations in their own right.
Digital disruption is a communications revolution, gathering pace from email and texting to always on mobile, from the internet to the Internet of Things, from the ways we share food pictures to the way your fridge orders food. So what do those in the communications business think about it? We spoke with a disruptor, a network provider and a telco to find out where they think this thing is going.
What's happened is that control is gone. In the 60s, AT&T was a place where people would reach out and touch someone literally. If you wanted to connect, you had to go through the AT&T network.
We need 100 X207 wrenches right away.
In the 60s, in the States, if the phone rang and somebody was having sex, they would stop having sex to answer the phone.
Hello, Mary. This is Alice. How are you?
50 years later, where in the world do you go to reach out and touch someone or find someone? It's Facebook. I believe that Facebook has become the AT&T of the 60s, except it's much more powerful. Now they have 1.5 billion subs. They're much more susceptible to change, too. The reason why Facebook is going out and acquiring companies like WhatsApp and Instagram is because they have to be worried about being disrupted. As much as the telcos had to worry about being disrupted, Facebook has it at a much higher level, a much higher degree of susceptibility, in fact. It's quite possible, based on my analysis, that Facebook doesn't stay Facebook 5 years from now if they don't continue to embrace the edge of innovation. If Facebook ever feels comfortable being Facebook, it's over.
The first thing is don't panic. A number of people, I think a number of vendors, a number of suppliers are trying to confuse people to a certain extent about what digital disruption brings. It affects some companies on a spectrum massively, and it affects some companies hardly at all. So the interesting thing is, if you're an art gallery, how does digital help you? Well, it can help you, but does it fundamentally disrupt your business? But then you look at other organizations such as retail, it can change it fundamentally. You can now question, do I need a high street presence? Can I do more online? Can I do everything online?
Disruption is good for the industry because it keeps the innovation pace continuously increasing. We are seeing now, this conference is strangely enough, talking already about 5G, only 4 years after we introduced 4G. That has never happened before.
So even the disruptors will be disrupted. Don't panic and embrace change. But what change should you embrace first? This is the modern sea-level challenge. You've always had to place your bets, but there have never been so many horses moving so quickly. For Messrs Horn and Jewell, it's clear. No one knows the distant future, but we can see what's around the corner. Whatever you're preparing for, and in this next example, it's the Internet of Things. Get the basics right first.
The scale of the network and the IT environment will be very, very critical. The number one focus area will be to make this very cost efficient. Because as we move in the IoT, we will see ARPUs declining in the IoT space because the usage is relatively little. At the same point in time, number of devices will escalate. People talk about billions of devices within the next few years to come. So the network and the IT environment needs to be able to cope with that. For that, we need to have the right architecture in order to make this scale effect very, very cost efficient. Otherwise, it will not work out economically for the operators.
The network is critically important because the network is the one thing that's actually holding a lot of people back. And so by freeing it up to make it more like your applications, or freeing up to be more like your server environment or your cloud environment, can reap huge benefits for you. An example that we give would be, why build a network now for maximum capacity? Why not build for the capacity that you normally have and then offload into the cloud?
That feels like good, solid advice regardless of industry. Research, identify and put the best building blocks in place for your most important projects. And if you feel like legacy technology is holding you back, it's worth remembering something else that Marcus Jewell told us. The future is always built on legacy technology, but never on a legacy mindset.
What we make today will be legacy tomorrow, and what we make tomorrow will be legacy in the future. It's more into the mindsets which creates the problem. And it's a convenient excuse to use legacy technology as an issue to not move forward into a digital world.
So doing nothing is more hazardous than doing something. But if our experts are clear on first steps, what about the hazy future? A disruptor's role is to identify the next big thing, and that's often to be found by betting against the markets. Jeff Pulver is thinking about life after automation, which makes sense, because if we're all buying digital disruption, the next big thing must be to disrupt digital.
There's now a 50% chance or better that the next time you call a call center, you're talking to a computer. That's going to change the way we interact. There was a time when it was called a person-to-person telephone call for a reason. It's not a machine-to-machine call, no, it's a person calling a person, right? There's a reason, I think, why P2P matters. And so I'm looking at the continuing evolution of how people connect, how we share, how we engage. You know, how is it that we're now a swipe to the right society? I don't get that. You know, imagine when you were in high school, if you could actually be blocked by your friends. I mean, how crazy is it to our mental state that there's an entire generation growing up, you just say block. What, they don't exist anymore? Are they invisible? How does that affect the way we're connecting individually? Because there's a lot of communication that happens where it's unspoken. So as far as where the future goes, it's going to be interesting to see how we evolve, but until we could figure out a better replacement to a hug, I don't think that we have to worry too much about technology taking over our lives, but people do get lazy. And not everyone's able to communicate with words what they feel.